Hello traders, Day Trader Matt here of businesswithtrading.com doing a trading strategy recap for Monday the 10th of August. And today was a fairly interesting day, and by interesting I mean pretty frustrating. And the reason is we had a difficult time getting into a trade. We missed about 3 trades before we finally entered our one trade of the day that we got. Price opened up. We watched it. It started to move. We were trying to get in. Couldn't get in here. Couldn't get in over here. We, couldn't get in over here. And then we finally got in right here. We took a little bit of heat on that, but then it did come up a little bit. And, I did talk about what I was looking at seeing, and talked about looking for price to come up into this region right here. It did come up a little bit over that, but I was looking for it to come into this region right here. That it did finally get into it around 1 o'clock, 1 to 2 o'clock. Finally got into that region. And that's all part of trading. We closed the room at 12. And that's why we got out of the trade, because, time was kind of running out. And it was like, well, I'm going to get out for the sake of the room. But I told everybody what I was looking for. So even though the trade did have a little bit more upside that it was able to make, and I, gave the recommendation that I really feel the price was going into that area, for the sake of the room, we have to take profit. I've seen, people talk about why, if I stick around, why don't we just stay in the trade? Everybody in the room did stick around, but, it is what it is. We ended up closing the room somewhere over about 12:15, 12:20ish, something like that is when we ended up closing the room. I did talk about it going higher, which it did about 20 minutes after. And that's what, I guess this is a good example to talk about. That's what trading is about, the risks, the rewards, stuff like that. There's no reason to stay open after the fact and grab another few points when the room's only open till 12. That's really like me going back on my word. Yeah, we stayed around for an hour just to watch price. It in life, we're only as good as our integrity is our word, and that's why I try to be as transparent as possible with the website. We show when we have losses, we show when we have gains. Yeah, there are a few times here and there that I don't record a recap just because I'm, putting my time elsewhere, and I just don't have the time to catch up. And I guess that goes to show, as humans, we only have 24 hours in a day. And depending on how much you like your sleep is dependent upon how much stuff can get done. For me, educating, helping, coaching clients, working with students, that's more important than the free stuff that we offer here. And that's always going to take precedence. And with your trading, being able to get your pinpoint entry should always take precedence over having to be in the market. The market's moving, what's happening. Well, let's look at today. The market moved, it kept moving, it moved again, kept moving, kept moving. Oh, we finally got in the trade at 11:10. Actually, it was 11:12 to be exact. We got in at 11:12. So from 9:30 all the way till 11:11, we were not in a trade. Yeah, we missed 3 entries, but we were not in a trade. And this is where a lot of, newer traders, novice traders would just get totally frustrated. I'm not getting filled. I just need to just jump in the market, whatever it's doing. Doesn't matter. Well, the market's going up. Why don't we just short it? Or why don't we just jump in long? Okay, let's say we jumped in long up here because we're like, all right, price, made a new high over this. Let's just jump in long. We'll look at all that heat. And as per our rules in the trading room, we would have been stopped out right on this candle here. You know, that's what being patient is all about. You know, I talk about being a patient trader quite a bit, and that's when, you know, days like today is when that really pays off. You know, to be patient, to wait on the trade. Yeah, it was very frustrating waiting for that trade and missing 3 good entries. You know, but that's what trading's about. You know, especially day trading. Day trading, and I firmly believe this, that if you're not using limit orders and you're trying to day trade, you know, you're really playing a sucker's game, because it makes it so difficult. You know, and I see people out there, and, you know, I'm not saying that you can't make a trade with the market order and make money, because you can always make money doing something. But can you do it consistently? I don't think so. You know, that's not what I believe. And so, anyway, I wanted to talk about that a little bit, show what we did. You know, we did miss 3 trades, and it's important just because a lot of new traders don't really grasp the concept of what it really means to miss a trade. You know, we really need to, you know, focus on our trading and know that it's all part of a plan. You know, we have a trading plan. We have a core strategy that we look for. We're looking for a setup. It either happens or it doesn't. We put in our limit orders when we see a good setup, and it either gets hit or it doesn't. You know, if we would have gotten filled on all of our trades, you know, we would have made some really good money. And that's what a lot of newer traders focus on. Man, if I would have only made that entry, how much money I would have made. Man, that's so good. Look at that. All this fake profit, you know, fictitious paper money profit. You know, because it's money that you never would have had because you never got filled. You know, and it's also telling your brain that I need to, you know, be more aggressive. I need to be more aggressive. Well, once you get more aggressive, let's say you get into that very volatile market, so you're being more aggressive, you're putting your entry way higher or lower than it needs to be, and you get stopped out a lot more. And then, you know, you look at it and you're like, man, maybe I need to be a little looser. And then a day like today happens, and then you get more aggressive. You know, that's what a lot of newer traders do. And, you know, looking back, you know, my trading career, you know, it's something that really hinders your trading a lot more than we actually see on the surface. You know, because it brings all these bad ideas, and it tells our brains, like, hey, we need to do this, or we need to do that. Even though this and that are very bad, and we should never do them. So, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Hopefully it made sense. You can always comment below if you have any feedback, comments. Love to hear any comments. With that, thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. If you enjoy the video, you know, like and share it. I definitely would appreciate that. Again, have an awesome day, and I'll see you back here in the markets. Thank you.